Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today, I'm having a really insightful conversation with the writer and director of The Law, a really captivating micro short, which is now available to view on CenterFrame. So, Tony, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing, Nathan?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Really looking forward to chatting to you about this film. I think it'd be interesting for anyone who doesn't know, what is this film about?
Um, yeah, it's a fun one to try and describe. I always try to express it as it's just a short story, a very short story about a fisherman who's hoping for a quiet night, but very quickly discovers he's not the only one hoping to hook something.
Amazing, amazing. And it stars the wonderful Johnny Vivash, doesn't it?
Yes,
He
yes,
seems to get
absolutely.
everywhere.
The wonderful Mr. Vivash.
He just seems to get everywhere, that guy. Love Johnny. So if there was like a one sentence pitch for the film that would make people want to see it, what do you suppose that would be?
Um, I think probably the simplest, and again, being a micro short, it's a trickier one to come up with a log line for sometimes. But I think the simplest thing I could say is it's an espresso shot of horror. It's just meant to be this just really nice, sharp, short, sweet, satisfying little gulp of horror.
And tell me, like, how did the project sort of come around and come about? What was your inspiration?
Um, it came from a couple of things. One of them was I'd just been really inspired by lots of my colleagues making really tremendous shorts. A friend of mine, Tiago, made one. The name's escaping now, but I believe that won the Encounters Micro Short Challenge a few years ago, and that was one of those ones which like, how dare you be that smart with the micro shot? You think you're ahead of it, and then it does something even smarter than you could imagine. And another friend, David York, did one called Foresight, I believe, and I was just always impressed by just the specificity and the kind of the confidence in those. And I've done a number of longer form shorts, and I've done a couple of features. So I was really interested in trying to challenge myself to go the other direction, and and in that process, try and rethink all my bad habits and see how um, more kind of like aggressively efficient I could be, for lack of a better term.
I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because conventional wisdom would say, "Oh, we'll do a micro short, then we'll do a longer short, then we'll go to features." But you've actually done this different
Yeah,
journey where you've gone, made shorts and features. I'm going to go and do something different. I'm going to go. I don't want to say I want to go back because it's not really. There's no going back in this industry. You've gone
no.
forward in a different tangent. What? So aside from the technical challenge of it, did you have any other motivations? Were you spying like festival submissions with this film? You mentioned
I mean,
account.
I think that's always on the agenda a little bit with filmmakers about making sure the work can be seen. We always want that. But there was a whole bunch of things I wanted to do in it. My partner had been encouraging me to write drabbles, which are these like 100-word kind of short stories in writing sprints, and I'd kind of come up with this idea of like a little fishing horror because I've always been interested in the liminality of that, just because these two worlds and different things like that within it. I work at a really great film school at the University of Salford, and I had a number of colleagues that we were keen to just work together and try out some of the equipment that we had. I don't like testing kit in sterile environments, so I thought let's get it out in the middle of nowhere in the dark and the cold and on a sleepy March night and see what we can do and really push the sensor. We hadn't shot an open gate before, so there's all these little kind of things that kind of really nicely came together. I really wanted to work with Johnny, and I'd worked with him before, but I'd never directed him. So there's all these kind of little pieces came together really, really neatly for it, which was really, really great. And after a much longer set of projects, I'd spent, I think, 5 to 7 years on one short beforehand. It took years and years of work in terms of getting the rights and then doing all this R&D in terms of makeup effects. This, from like idea to done, was 6 months, and we shot it in 6 hours, and that was a really pleasant experience as well. And like it was in Fright Fest later that year, within 4 months, so it was really just a really nice turnaround to have on a project. So that in itself was really rewarding, because I'd had and I think a lot of people have this when you're working on some projects. It feels like you can't get away from them at times, and this just felt like a really nice antidote to that.
Yeah, I mean that is incredibly short. So I mean 6 months from inception to writing this idea to executing it, and then of course you cut it as well, I believe.
Yes, I'm a glutton for punishment, but I'm trying to cut less these days. But this was, again, one of those things I really wanted to challenge myself on, because I have a tendency to let things breathe in the edit, which I like. I think and that's appropriate for some things, but for a micro, absolutely not. So remember just the first few shots, I was already at like 30 seconds. I was like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. So I need to start paring this right down. And that just became a really interesting investigation to, okay, what shot do people need first? How long does this need to run to register? What do I need to do to couch people in the world, and then move on? And then when have we had enough? When to move on? And how we're consistently trying to give new information to the viewer and keep it moving forward, but not feeling rushed. Because if it's a horror piece, as this one was, it's not a frenetic one. It is meant to be like a slow tension build, but still make that feel succinct. So it was, that was a real challenge within the edit as well.
I mean, that in itself is really interesting, because even though this film has a very short runtime, it doesn't feel rushed. Like there is breathing room in the edit of the film.
Yeah, I really wanted to make sure that was the case, and it's important, I think, even in micro shorts, to get that sense of character across. So just, for example, like the care that you see the fisherman picking out their lure and then sitting back down and just letting that moment of peace come in before the fly comes in, and that's where kind of the freneticism came in. And I think that was an area where we realized we didn't need as much as we thought we did. We thought, we'd have all sorts of flailing and swinging and stuff like that, but you get the idea quite quickly, and then it's like, okay, now let's move forward. So that's one of those bad habits I think it was helpful to do, is like just not keep chasing after an idea, or just really bathing in it when we get it. Let's move on. And I think that's something which I can take forward into much longer form work going forward, and just in terms of recognizing when it's time to move on.
I think there is a tremendous thing to take from that, where brevity is precious, isn't it? Like they used to come into a scene late, leave it early, and operating within those confines, you've managed to find some real space. I think you've done really well with that.
Thank you.
The other thing that you mentioned is you got the equipment from the University of Salford. Was it the way I assume you?
That's the film school I teach at.
Yes, where you teach. Okay, amazing. And what did you film it on?
This is where I get really nerdy. Some of my DOP friends kind of always make fun of me for this, because I'm a bit more of a nerdy director than most. But I like that, because I like to get really into the weeds of the discussion with my DOP. So we'd recently brought in an Arri Mini LF, and that's got a really large format sensor, and it lets you shoot open gate. I believe that was the model that Denis Villeneuve used on the first Dune. I'm not sure about the subsequent ones, but that just sounded like an exciting proposition anyway, just to try and shoot on that. And I like shooting in an environment that's going to kind of push what we have, or at least as well push my team, push myself, and not take things for granted. Because if we're shooting out, not in the middle of nowhere, but in somewhere which just doesn't have the most light, making sure that we're going to make sure that's feeling really rich as an image was something which was really important. And I spoke a lot with my DOP Steve White about how he really wanted to give it a very 80s John Carpenter kind of aesthetic. So like the moon is very blue, which and that contrasts against the really warm amber of the camping light. So we really wanted to see how far we could push that with the LF, and then we brought in a lot of filters, quite too many filters for some, but like really bringing a really nice glow and a haze to it. So it really feels warm and safe until unfortunate business happens.
But what were the light sources then that you had? Because obviously there's the fisherman's lights, and with the LF with such wide latitude, you probably could have just done with that, but you might need some bounce or something.
Yeah, no, we needed quite a bit actually, because that kind of stylized moonlight, we really needed to make sure we had something really providing that, so we couldn't rely on anything ambient. And there's only so far you can push the sensor. Some of my DOP's friends, they always kind of comment, you can shoot in low light, but you need to give the sensor something. It needs light to kind of sustain itself. So we brought in a really big light. I forget the model for the moon, but lots of diffusion on that, and some color on it to give that really nice blue quality to it. And then a number of practicals, but all with swap bulbs for the kind of the warmth of the camping lights. And I believe we had a big fill globe just off center, again, just kind of help keep it warm, keep it feel like it's just the lights and the moon. But yeah, absolutely, there was a ton of lights on either side of the actor, which again, hopefully feel completely invisible when you're watching the film.
They're invisible to me, and I would say I'm a little bit technical. When it comes to what I think is fascinating about this film is, even though it seems small in nature, would you agree that making something so contained allowed you to focus in depth on every particular aspect of this film, rather than making something that's longer and requires you to spread your focus across lots of things. This is like a very contained story, isn't it?
Yeah, it does, and that was actually something which I really enjoyed, because again, every moment counts. So just how Johnny's picking out the lure, the look on his face, making sure you're hitting all the beats, and those are all quite normal in terms of what you're kind of, I think, typically looking at. You're supposed to be paying attention to those moments. But one thing I did pay a lot more attention to than I normally do, and I do love doing this, but normally, but it was the sound design. Got to work with Sam Mason on this, and he did a fantastic job. And I've never obsessed more on like chair creaks and breaths and swipes and gasps than I have in this. Like it was, I'm pretty sure I drove him mad on that, just because it had to be so specific, because it was telling a lot of the story, probably more than you normally think. I think in other spaces, I think it can be quite easy to be not lazy with sound design, but kind of relax a little bit in terms of the attention you're giving it, and just let it just sit there a little bit. For this, it was every single second. What is it doing? Just from, a question of, are we going to have Johnny humming at the start just to set the mood, and the sound of it cracking open, the sound of the fly, all those little kind of beats to it. And if we're going to put a little sting into the sound, because there was no music, but we're going to put something a little bit sonic in there just for the reveal, and then the whip.
That's really interesting as well then. So how tightly scripted was this film, or was there a bit of latitude in terms of, well, all of these aspects actually?
I mean, it was pretty scripted. We actually cut a couple things out, but the script as it was about a page and a bit, like maybe 2.8. But the stuff we cut out basically just brought it down to one page. But all the key action takes place. It very much carries over, pretty much beat for beat. But we did take out a couple things, and just because we felt it added to the mystery and made it a bit more interesting. So initially there was an idea that when the fly had been crushed, you could see maybe some sparks or something flying in it, and it's suggesting that it was a robot or a tool or something that someone had used. But that felt less interesting. In the same, we toyed with on the night when we were shooting with whether or not there was going to be a big light, kind of like almost like a UFO style light, was going to turn on and then pull in. But again, all that just felt less interesting in the moment, and we just thought we'd just lean into the liminality of it, and just kind of the slightly more open cosmic weirdness of it, because that's kind of where the idea came from in terms of, I've seen people pulled into the water before in horror stories, but this was about the experience the fish has, because they don't understand the world above the surface. So if our fisherman is getting yoinked up, there's much less understanding of what is doing that. So that's kind of what we decided to lean into. So we just simplified it, but everything was very designed from a script standpoint.
I think the enigma is one of the things that's captivating about this film, and I think it's one of the things that makes it so distinct. Is you don't know. It's not really important that you know. Actually, it's I think it helps. So, were there any films or filmmakers that influenced this story at all?
Generally, it was mostly friends in terms of micro shorts. I mentioned people like Tiago, whose first feature Custom just came out with Paranoid Android films. And again, it's more just the notion and the form of micro shorts. But as a film point, and this is so obvious and cheesy, but John Carpenter, just because me and my DOP Steve, we just love that look of particularly 80s horror. There's so much color, but there's still lots of deep shadow, and there's a playfulness to it, but at the same time still remembering to keep an unnerving quality to it. So we wanted to kind of feel like it could be something that sat in John Carpenter's filmography, or basically, or his DOP had come in and shot after finishing The Fog. They came over and shot The Lure of Us, basically.
That's the story you need to tell people. That's what happened.
Yeah, that's what it. Yeah.
Let's do it again. Who shot your film? In all seriousness, I'm just joking. So after you finished the film, what happened next?
We started the initial festival run. It was an interesting one, because I've had a good, I've been lucky to have really nice response on Festival Trail in the past, but it was a real big question mark for this one, because I really did not know how festivals would respond to a micro short. Did it feel substantial enough to them? Was it something that they'd be interested in? And that was something which we got really disabused of really quickly. Like, the response was the best I'd ever had up front in terms of selections. it was a while until we got our first rejection, and rejection is normal, but I'd never went this long before a rejection in the initial kind of run. So that kind of gave us a really surprising level of confidence. That was really nice. We'd kind of realized we'd made something that was clicking and it was working with people, but that really encouraged us to start thinking a bit broader about where we could potentially put it, that it didn't just have to be exclusively horror festivals, which is fine, but there's you like to be able to kind of bring some of these out and let them kind of transcend a little bit and not be too tied to that. So we kind of went from the sort of traditional big hitters like Fright Fest and Scream Fest, which was, again, really awesome to get, but then starting thinking about things like Galway or Carmarthen Bay, like looking at BAFTA and Oscar Predator festivals and saying, well, can we make it? Shall we give that a shot? And it was in that process where we saw that CenterFrame was among some of his many really excellent funding opportunities. That one of them was for a festival fund, which I was personally very excited about because those just don't get offered. I don't think I've ever seen one anywhere else before. Usually it's a production package or it's a development package, things like that, which again are all obviously very helpful. But I feel that festival run is often overlooked and the cost of it is quite overlooked. And it's kind of a cost that you have to eat in a lot of ways as a filmmaker, and you kind of it's just a separate cost and you'll figure it out later. But there is a very definitive ceiling, and I think I was literally just on the verge of thinking, I don't know how much further we can afford to push this, even though it does feel like there's a lot of life in this. And then we saw that in the latest round of offerings that there was the festival fund, so we dropped it in and just to see what happened. You never know. It's always that kind of lottery with it, but we're obviously helpful. I mean, we're actually in Film Quest. I think it's like only our first or second screening of the film in America, and everyone else had seen the live stream you guys had done before me, so everyone was telling me that I'd won the award, which was great. But then, that was fantastic news because that was quite early on in our run, but it really put us in a position to then be able to really, really double down on it, and very kind of blue sky this submission. The shocking thing is the money still runs out. You think that's going to be enough for everything, but it really, really enabled us, and it also meant we could attend a number of festivals as well, which was really cool. And it's why the film's been by far the most successful of films I've put out there in the festival circuit, just because of that sheer depth of opportunity we had to put it out there.
And no doubt, submitting to festivals is death by 1,000 cuts. I say that to so
many. Yeah.
So how, if you recall, because you might not remember, but how many festivals did you submit to, and how many have you been accepted at? I'm dead keen to know.
I can't remember off the top of my head how many we were submitted to, but I do know we've been selected by 84. I should be able to remember the total number, but I think it's probably in the region of 150, 175 total. I know we were between 60 and 70% acceptance rate, which was something that we were really proud of, because the experience I've always had is, and the kind of rule of thumb is, I think with a lot of my peers, is it's usually something more like a 30 to 40% acceptance rate. And at one point we were like 80, 90, which was nuts, but it kind of leveled down something more reasonable, because the longer it's out there, kind of the awareness changes, but also the sheer amount we did, it brought it down to something more reasonable. But I think we still finished between 60 and 70. So off that bad maths, I'm going to say around 150, 170 that we submitted to. But we were still very targeted within that as well. You still have to be careful what you're submitting to make sure it's something that still has value for the life of the film.
Because yes, of course, I think the whole festival strategy question is a really broad topic, and something that I'm really keen to talk about. I suppose, do you think there's any mileage in making a micro short as a way of ingratiating yourselves to festival directors?
Oh yeah, the response has been really, really interesting off this. I've had a lot of people tell me in the aftermath of it how this is a much more effective calling card for my work than like any number of other stuff that I've done, which is, again, the common mindset is, oh, you do a feature and that's going to get you your next feature. That's how it works, and you just figure out how you're going to get that first feature off the ground. But I've done a couple. Again, I hate the term no budget features, but anything sub 250 is considered like just no budget, regardless of what that costs people individually. But done a few of those, and that unfortunately doesn't stack the deck for you as much as it might have done 5-10 years ago. But the law has really opened things up, because it's a very easy thing to stick on a pitch deck, a very easy thing to kind of just share in a chat, and 90 seconds later people have seen the work and they got a sense of what you can do, and it works better than I think advertising and something like that might work, because that's beholden to something else. This is much more invested in a narrative, and I think it gives an understanding of my taste and things like that. But this the same about any number of my friends over micro shorts I've seen, like just the clarity of the storytelling. I think it conveys a certain confidence in storytelling that I think means you could then potentially have confidence in that storyteller to tell another story regardless of the length, hopefully.
Yeah. We did some CenterFrame spotlight events last year where we had panels of producers and execs from some of the UK's leading production companies. The gist of it was that if someone sends me a 10 to 15 minute film or longer, I need to make the time for it. But if someone says, well, here's a film, it's 2 minutes, they'll pop it on in their lunch break really easily, and it's very convenient for them. Anyway, there's not really a question to that. Just
but I think it just speaks to the value in it, and something that we had underestimated. I think that it's in that kind of awareness of the TikTokification, of our time and attention span and things. And I don't think it means that people aren't interested in watching 10 to 15 minute shorts. So I go to plenty of festivals and there's 40 minutes in there and things like that. But I think just in terms of just getting that immediate response from someone, like having something like that will encourage people to watch other stuff. And I found that's been the case when I've been reaching out to people, for crew or cast. I show them the lore, and then I can show them something else if it's which is 10, 15 minutes, and then if like those, they can check out a feature and things like that, and it kind of scales up the interest from that.
That's very smart. Like you can gauge whether they're interested, and then you can more and some more. I like that. Yeah, I like that. So if you could go back to the first day of pre-production on this film, is there anything you would have done differently about the making of it?
There's only one thing, and that's only with extreme retrospection. And I don't do this often. I'm usually very, very specific about aspect ratio and things like that. And initially we shot it for the classic John Carpenter, like 2:3:5 aspect ratio. But as we were shooting it, and we were shooting it in open gate, which is more like 4:3 square format, it was just favoring the close-up so beautifully. We kind of made the decision as we were shooting it, oh, okay, right, we're just gonna use the full frame, which is something I don't usually like doing, and it's something I always fry my film students for this when they shoot anything in 4:3. Like, why are you doing it? Like, what's in a way that it's not just for a trendy purpose. Because I feel like we go through these phases of different aspect ratios that filmmakers are into, and I think some do it just more for aesthetic reasons rather than ones which I think really work into the storytelling. But what was interesting in ours is because we'd framed it a certain way for certain shots, it left all this negative space above the fisherman as well. So when it wasn't just the close-ups, it added to the tension as well. So we kind of pivoted on the day to do that. And I don't wish I could go back to rethink it, but it'd be nice to, just in case, to have maybe had that in mind from the outset. But I still don't think I'd really change anything, which is very rare. Like on most other things, you change tons, but I feel really, really happy with how it turned out. It was a real gift of a film in that way.
I suppose that's the other benefit of keeping the film extremely short.
Yes, yeah, very much so.
Anyway, so why did you choose to distribute the film online with CenterFrame?
I think it's very simple, because if you make a film but there's no audience for it, does the film even exist? Like it's something that you want to make sure there's an audience for your film, and I don't think there's, unless you've somehow curated your own fan base online. Most filmmakers are just putting their films out into the ether on Vimeo or YouTube or whatever, and just hoping for the best. And I think having a partner is so important for getting that ease of access for your film. And so partnering with CenterFrame was such an easy decision for us after see all the support we'd had with the festival campaign. It just means more opportunity for people to find it. So it's one of those things of why on earth wouldn't we want CenterFrame to partner with?
Amazing. And what does the 50-50 revenue share mean to you as an independent filmmaker?
Well, for lack of a better term, it's just bloody nice. We're used to being very much kind of screwed over, for lack of a better term, and I've certainly had that experience with other projects I've had in the past in terms of how that's worked. And I know many of my other peers have had that issue in the past. So something which feels, very democratic and very supportive to the filmmaker is great. It's it's a pleasant minority that shouldn't be the minority.
Yeah, it's a one of our rationales behind obviously we want to elevate our community members, but it seems to be the case that it's so difficult to make a living in this industry these days that we don't pretend that the revenue that anyone's going to get off these films is going to set the world alight. But it could be like dinner out, it could be a food order, it could be
it's a festival submission, and I think that's the stuff that helps. Is every little helps in that regard, and I think that's a really nice way of thinking of it in terms of it, not being this all-encompassing thing. It's just something which helps you along the way, and it's that's something which is so important, particularly with shorts, because that's the thing which is particularly difficult to sustain. Keep making shorts. So any of these kind of programs, again, particularly since CenterFrame has so many of these different avenues to do that, I think all of that is to the benefit of filmmakers.
So we're getting to the end now, Tony. I really appreciate you giving me all your time and answering these questions so thoroughly and with such worthy answers as well. I really.
Oh, good.
But what's next for you, Tony? And what should we be looking out for?
A couple of things at the moment. Like all of us, I'm working on a feature. We always have to say that, but I really am. I've got a script and a really good producing team, and the script is on desks, which is exciting, but I can't say what desks and all that kind of stuff. Believe it when I'm on set. But it's a body horror. But imagine a drier version of The Substance. So that's all I'll say.
Drier.
Yeah. I love The Substance, but that was very goopy. Imagine something on the opposite end of the spectrum. But that's something I'm hoping to do, and that's a feature. Hopefully, in the next few years, we'll see what happens. But in the interim, we're starting to put together a couple other things at the moment. I've got that itch again for shorts. I know a lot of people, say that once they got to features, they're never going back. I can't really do that because I get that itch when I'm not on set. I get the FOMO, and I couldn't imagine doing something and then I'm not on set within another year or two. I just need to kind of do that again. So I've got a project at the moment I'm starting to put together with some friends, and we've been submitting for funding this past few weeks. So we'll see what happens there. But that's another again, almost predictably a horror piece. This one involves Vikings, but we'll see what happens there.
Vikings, I love that. But look, regardless, best of luck with all of those projects. And I know what you mean about the FOMO, about getting back out on set. It's the longer you go without being on set, the more of a needle in the side it is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's biting me right now.
Particularly I think this is the downside of social media as well, though, when you see all of your friends out shooting their shit, and it's like, oh God, I want to be out there. But you know what? It's fine. You're going to make another film soon. And it's, in fact, by the way, there's going to be some new funding opportunities coming on CenterFrame quite soon.
Very good.
Yeah,
okay, I'll have to keep my eye on that.
Yeah. No, please do. But listen, thank you guys for watching this interview with Tony. You can check his film The Lure on YouTube. I'm also going to be creating a blog from this piece, which you can read on the CenterFrame website. But for now, head over to our YouTube and check out the film The Lure. Thank you very much.